Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. I'm talking with my friend Eric Brakey, the new executive director of the Free State Project, and we're going to talk about all of the advances made in New Hampshire by libertarians. It is literally the libertarian laboratory for democracy. Check it out. Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. Senator Brakey, how are you?
I'm doing well, Matt Kibbe. It's nice. It's been a year since we spoke last. Good
Yes.
to be on with you.
And you are allegedly retired from politics.
Yeah, allegedly. For
Allegedly.
now, I don't know. It's still young. It's a young retirement, so there's a long life ahead of me where I could make the mistake again of jumping into politics.
And you, we've talked about this before, but let's just remind people that you were a state senator in Maine, and which started off, your interest in politics was as a Ron Paul kid, and you caught the bug.
Yeah, Ron
Liberty
Paul
bug.
inspired me and passed the torch to all of us in 2012, and been running with it ever since.
And you were you've been a long time attendee of the Free State Project and Pork Fest. And what's the winter event called?
So we just had our Porcupine Day, but I think you're thinking of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, which
Yes.
which usually we've done in February, but this year we decided to push into April.
Okay.
So when it's
But it'll still be snowing.
I hope not. We'll see. It is New Hampshire, but
You'll get like 2 feet of snow that
yeah,
week.
I will say, for all the people who say New Hampshire gets a lot of snow, I did just see that Florida got a boatload of snow dropped on them, so
Yeah.
we had a bit of a chuckle of it up north.
You guys are more prepared, perhaps.
Yeah, we know how to deal with snow.
Yeah. But you were a state senator in Maine, and you were quite often sort of that lonely voice of liberty there. Did some good work, upset all the right people, but you have moved to New Hampshire.
That's right. It's been 10 years of work in Maine politics, from the Ron Paul campaign through 3 terms of the Maine Senate, 2 runs for federal office, including a run for U.S. Senate against Angus King, where I ended up was named in the Twitter files. So that was a fun experience, I guess.
Oh, tell the story.
I
don't know this story.
When Matt Taibbi released the Twitter files, he noted that there was this U.S. Senator from Maine who apparently sent in a lot of requests to censor critics on the platform that was then called Twitter, and they were all, it was like me and my supporters who were critics of him. I guess it started because on the anniversary of the 9/11 Twin Tower attacks, when I was running against him, he came to a ceremony in my town, my city that I represented, Auburn, Maine, and he was this is in 2020, and he compared the 9/11 Twin Tower attacks to Russian election hacking. He said it was the same kind of attack on America. They used to fly planes into towers, and now with a computer they will hack our elections. And I thought that was a little insensitive, and not just insensitive, but I thought it was dangerous, right? This kind of escalatory, saber rattling, based on a lot of false propaganda,
And quite insulting to people that died on 9/11.
Yes, yeah, both.
And perhaps all of the soldiers and innocents who died in the response to 9/11.
Yeah, it was insulting looking backwards and dangerous looking forwards. And so we happened to have someone there who recorded that. We released it to the media. None of the local media would pick it up, but Tucker Carlson picked it up, and so did Breitbart, and it became kind of big on social media and in some of the conservative national media. Angus King responded by going to Twitter to try to get them to take down the video, and then they didn't end up taking down the video, but there was an exchange where then they provided Twitter with a list of problematic accounts that they wanted them to investigate to see if they were maybe they were Russian meddlers or something. And they were a lot of them were my supporters who were very critical of him. And we thought it was interesting because, well, it was interesting no matter what. But he's also on the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee. And so it's, I don't know. It was, I think, a clear kind of abuse of power in this moment of censorship that was being pushed by so many in Washington, D.C. And sadly, he's still there. He's still. It was interesting to watch him on the Intelligence Committee grilling Tulsi Gabbard about how Edward Snowden is a traitor or this or that. So hopefully, what can you do?
Yeah, before I go on, I have to ask: are you a Russian asset?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never spoken with any of them over there. I don't know if they put me in their asset column or their liability column, or if I'm in any columns at all.
Yeah.
But
You and Tulsi.
I think it's an interesting phrase, right? Russian asset, because it doesn't actually imply that you actually have any relationship whatsoever with Russians. It's just like maybe if you're advocating for a pro-America foreign policy of like what business of ours is to be involved in all these color revolutions in Eastern Europe. And if you question that, then if that also aligns with Russia doesn't want people, meddling in nations near their border, like we wouldn't like it if people were overthrowing the government in Mexico. Like, does that make you an asset? I don't know. It's a pretty.
You should know Hillary Clinton is a regular avid watcher of this show, so she's probably taking notes now, and you've been added to the list.
Well,
but I want to summarize that story because it sounds. A incumbent senator on the Senate Foreign Relations Intelligence Committee jawboning companies to suppress the speech of his political opponent in the middle of an election?
Yes, I was actively campaigning against him.
Can that be legal? Is it constitutional? Because it sounds, speaking of Russian assets, it sounds like something Putin might do to his political enemies.
Yeah, it's certainly not the kind of thing you would hope to see happen in America.
Yeah.
I think we've seen a lot worse even, though, by many elected and unelected officials in our country. So, yeah, you would hope it's not legal, but no charges have ever been brought. And the people reelected him twice. That was just the most depressing thing of all.
Yeah. Well, they... unfortunately, this, like so much of politics is driven by what people don't know. And it's quite impossible sometimes to know what your legislators are actually up to because they spend a great deal of their time making sure that you can't find out, which, of course, is part of what the Twitter files was all about. But it's interesting. Maybe Elon and Doge can dig some things up.
I'm looking for it. It does start to feel like with what Doge is doing, it does start to feel like the Twitter files are going to be peanuts compared to
a day in the park. Yeah.
The federal government files that are going to be coming out. Everything we're seeing. I know it's probably going to be a little while before this is posted, so this could be dated. We'll be on to all the new things, but to see kind of USAID kind of slashed and burned and things starting to come out there.
Yeah.
It's very encouraging to see. It's like all of Washington, D.C. is getting an enema.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I have it'll be out by then. I have a new episode of our series, The Cover-Up, coming out on BlazeTV. And the timing is pretty perfect because simultaneously we're discovering, and by the way, these aren't actually new discoveries, but the few people, including Rand Paul, who was talking about USAID and they're basically money laundering from the defense and intelligence agencies to fund gain-of-function research. That is a colossal scandal, and it again, like as you said, this is the beginning of a process. I think we're all going to be taking a lot of red pills, discovering even like me, crazy paranoid libertarian. I'm going to be shocked at how evil and corrupt our federal government is.
Well, and it's so encouraging because I remember, and certainly, I was a little skeptical. I think many were very skeptical when you first heard about Doge and Elon Musk being put in to lead this commission or whatever we want to call it that didn't actually really exist. People were like, is this just like an advisory committee? You're going to put together some report and it's going to go to the president or it's going to go to Congress and nothing's going to happen, right? We've seen, reports on government waste and corruption and all these things before, and it just sits there, and, inertia is the rule in Washington, D.C. Nothing ever changes. So this is very different, and it's very exciting. I don't know where it will lead to, but it is, it's nice to see the bad guys worried.
I actually read the executive order that creates Doge, and it is a sophisticated and clever and 100% legal reorganization of an existing department that was created by Obamacare, an existing department that had responsibility for the integrity of computer systems and data. So they're basically using something that Barack Obama handed them to gut out waste, fraud, and corruption. And I'm here for it. It's beautiful.
Live by the sword, die by the sword.
But so we can, and I've been talking to various people about hopeful optimism about Doge, about USAID, the Department of Education, and other things. And by the time this runs, there'll probably be other government efficiency campaigns that we can talk about. But your project is the go bag, in case we don't fix Washington, D.C., and we should all be skeptical that we'll ever fix Washington, D.C. You've moved to New Hampshire, and you're now what's your title?
Executive Director.
Yeah.
Of the Free State Project.
Yep.
Yeah.
And your guys' argument from day one is we can't fix Washington, but we can fix New Hampshire.
Yeah, and it's nice to see when there are good things happening in Washington, D.C. I think that ultimately it's going to, maybe this is just the cynic in me, but I think ultimately it'll result in marginal improvements at best. Ultimately, the corruption and the power structure is so entrenched in Washington, D.C. that it's hard to imagine that, maybe the stars align and we see some nice changes, but it's hard to imagine what we as individuals or libertarians in organized groups could really do to have much impact on Washington, D.C. overall. I mean, we've succeeded in a few cases over the years, getting a few good people elected to Congress between Rand Paul and Thomas Massey. We had Justin Amash for a while. We've had a few new names and voices who've come in and who've left.
I keep Mike Lee on that list too.
Yeah, Mike Lee's pretty good.
Yeah,
I give him a B+. Yeah.
Which for a senator is
most of them I give, D's and F's. So there's a wide chasm between him and the rest.
Right.
But as libertarians, wherever we are in the country, we are lucky if we are perhaps 5% of the electorate and the populace, and 5% is not enough to make real significant changes to the politics and the culture around you. And even if marginal changes happen on the federal level, if the building blocks of this country are not in order, if our own local communities are not in order, then that's not a recipe for success. So the Free State Project is, as you know, it's a mass migration movement of libertarians to New Hampshire. It's been going on for 22 years. Thousands and thousands have made the move. And the results over the last generation have been pretty profound. Today, we have 98 Liberty legislators elected. They're leading the charge on abolishing taxes, on expanding school choice programs. Defend the Guard has been a big push that New Hampshire has led the way on, calling our National Guard troops home from wars that haven't been declared by Congress. But not just the politics of the state are transforming in a really nice way. I will note that change happens from the bottom up. We don't have Liberty congressmen or U.S. senators yet, but I imagine that day will come. But the culture is changing too, and the communities that are being built in New Hampshire are amazing. And you take a moment like we went through with COVID. Even though in New Hampshire we had a governor who was not the best governor when it came to COVID and was doing executive orders like a lot of the Democratic New England governors too, though I don't think he was as enthusiastic about it perhaps as some of them.
He wasn't Gretchen Whitmer.
He wasn't Gretchen Whitmer. He wasn't Janet Mills.
Yeah.
But he was still, he was not Ron DeSantis either. But the fact that you had strong, robust libertarian communities and networks in New Hampshire meant that it was easy to disregard these executive orders, and you weren't going to be socially isolated by people like so many good people I know in Maine who were, even if they didn't agree with it, they felt basically locked in their homes because all of the community around them was bought in,
right.
And they felt isolated and alone. That was not the experience of libertarians in New Hampshire because of the strong communities there.
Thank you for joining me today on Kibbe on Liberty and for being part of our fiercely independent audience. Every week, my organization, Free the People, partners with BlazeTV to bring you this show. My guests bring smart perspectives on everything from current events to timeless philosophical debates. If you like what you hear, go to freethepeople.org/KOL and support Kibbe on Liberty so we can continue to produce these honest conversations with interesting people. Now, let's get back to it. The neighborhood snitches during COVID is creepy beyond description because it reminds me of stories that Lee Schoolin told about growing up during Mao's Cultural Revolution.
Yeah.
Her biggest enemies were her neighbors.
Yeah.
It wasn't the government. But that's a rabbit hole. I wanted to ask her a question. I think Carla Gerke pointed this out, and maybe you can enlighten us. There's a reason why state politics is transformative because of the migration and repopulation of New Hampshire with liberty-minded people. But federal politics is different. And she said that students who are going to university in New Hampshire can vote in federal elections. Do you even know this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's unique to New Hampshire. I think that's everywhere. Although I know that many of the Republicans in the legislature want to do something about that. I'm not sure what I imagine legislation trying to prohibit out-of-state students from voting in New Hampshire elections would probably be challenged in federal court. I think that there have been past federal court decisions kind of cementing a lot of these things. I mean, I know that in the state of Maine, for example, it's in the state constitution that students who are, I'm trying to remember the language that's used, but students who are there on seminary or basically out-of-state students couldn't vote in Maine elections, but federal courts came in and ruled that the Maine Constitution was unconstitutional, believe it or not. So I imagine it's worth fighting, but I imagine it will.
It doesn't really make sense, particularly in an era where absentee voting is ubiquitous. But I don't know. It was a curious explanation for the disparity between your state legislature and some of your senators. Yeah,
and I'm still trying to, as someone who's new to New Hampshire, I'm still trying to make sense of it all. Like, why is there this swing block that either they're voting Democrat on the federal level and leaving the down ballot blank, or they're voting Democrat on the federal level and voting Republican on the local level? Maybe it's like Democrat voters who really don't want to have an income tax in New Hampshire.
Right.
and
I mean, that's real possible, right?
Yeah.
Because you get split ballot voting in a lot of purple states. And I guess, is New Hampshire purple?
New Hampshire is purple. And I think we've been fortunate, and I think the Free State Project plays a large role in this, that over much of the last decade on the state level, it's been consistently trending red.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know not all Republicans are created equal, but because of the very strong block of liberty Republicans that are within the legislature, that's now one of the strongest ideological coalitions in the Republican majority. So as long as Republicans are in charge and libertarians keep growing their voting block within that caucus, we're going to see that the legislature keeps steering the state towards liberty solutions to the problems that we face.
Yeah. I assume you're fluent in the left's strategy of taking certain states and introducing their most radical ideas, single-payer healthcare in Vermont, and using a state as a laboratory and eventually succeeding in passing their ideological agenda and then exporting it, because once a state is doing it, once it's passed into law, it sort of normalizes it, even if it's a crazy idea. Is that part of the New Hampshire strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. We have these 50 laboratories of democracy, but we don't have a libertarian one. New Hampshire is becoming the libertarian laboratory of democracy, where we can look at policies like constitutional carry and school choice, which New Hampshire really did help kind of push, kind of be early adopters of these policies that have now kind of these policies are getting adopted now all across the country. So I certainly think that for every libertarian in America should have a stake in what's happening in New Hampshire, even if you don't, even if you have no intention to move or be a part of what we're doing here, because the opportunity to take libertarian ideas that have lived in white papers for decades and to put them into reality and have a demonstrable, use case for them, that they work, they're effective, school choice works, putting parents in charge rather than bureaucrats in charge of a kid's education results in better outcomes. Once you can demonstrate that, it makes it that much easier for Tennessee and Florida and Texas and all these other states to point to that and take it up and pass it.
So what is two different categories? What is the most successful legislative change that has happened in New Hampshire, and then what is the most promising legislative proposal that can happen in New Hampshire?
Well, yeah, if you ask any free stater, you're going to get you'll get a million different ideas on that.
What? Really? There's diversity of opinion amongst libertarians?
Yeah. We don't herd cats. We just let them roam and build whatever libertarian projects they want to build. For me, I think that this is maybe the sexiest thing in the world, but, it is amazing to see coming from Maine that year after year, when Liberty Republicans have been running the show in New Hampshire, that the budget's actually cut. Spending gets cut from budget to budget. In Maine,
I don't know. That's pretty sexy.
Well, maybe nerds like you and me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
it's
for budget dorks.
Yeah, but I know, like in Maine, like the best we could hope for is, can we try to keep this budget in line with inflation? Right? We are, the dream of actually turning the clock backward and actually cutting spending from the previous year was never even on the table. And New Hampshire, that's become regular par for the course when Republicans have the go of it. They're really kind of cutting spending, and of course that's allowed them to do things like completely abolish all remnants of the income tax in the state. So we always said that New Hampshire had no income tax.
That's pretty sexy too.
Yeah, well, and that's tangible for people, right?
Yeah.
We always said it had no income tax. There was a little asterisk next to that because there was this thing called the interest and dividends tax. So investment income was taxed, but now that's been phased out. That's dead and gone. And that was decided by this election. If Democrats had taken back the legislature and the governorship, that was one of their first things they wanted to reinstitute before it was phased out and people got used to the idea of it not being there. So that's
was it. This is a tangent, but
Yeah.
I didn't follow the New Hampshire state politics. Was it viewed as possibly swinging control to Democrats?
Yeah, it was. There was a lot of concerns. Well, first of all, Governor Sununu, who was a popular governor, who I could critique from a libertarian perspective on many things, but we got a lot of good things done under him. He wasn't running again, so you had an open seat for the governorship. Kelly Ayotte did win, former Congress critter. Not so great on foreign policy, but pretty good on.
She was a senator, maybe.
Yeah, she was a senator,
Yeah.
and a neoconservative. So she's not going to.
Will New Hampshire be invading anything soon?
I do want to liberate the second district of Maine. But that's as far as my imperial ambitions go.
Yeah.
Maybe a few cities in Vermont. So she's not going to be helpful with us on Defend the Guard, which is, to your earlier question, one of the most promising things that we're building momentum for. But the New Hampshire House of Representatives was almost evenly split between Republicans and Democrats these last 2 years. I think Republicans had a 4-seat majority, so it really out of 400 members, so it really was who showed up that day who was really in charge. And there was a big concern that is Trump going to be popular enough to carry the ticket without Sununu running again? Is what's going to happen if Democrats took the House, which is the most libertarian body in the world, I would argue. We would have a strong presence in the Republican caucus, but if it was a minority caucus, it would be for nothing. Right. And then at the same time, the New Hampshire Senate is a strong Republican body, but it's very establishment Republican, and we only had one Liberty Republican there, which wasn't even enough to get roll call votes. So when Defend the Guard came to the New Hampshire State Senate, they just tabled it.
Yeah.
Never took a roll call, and they would never go on record. What happened in this election was it was a bigger success than anyone imagined. Republican governor, Republicans expanded their majority in the House from 4 to 40. And Republicans in the Senate now have a supermajority of 2/3, and our Liberty Republican senators went from 1 to 5, including winning. A Liberty Republican won the biggest city in New Hampshire, Manchester, which was ironically where the Democratic candidate for governor had been the mayor. So she lost her own city.
Yeah,
things are changing.
How did I don't know this? How did Trump do?
He came, I think, closer than they expected.
And that probably helped, right?
Yeah, it helped. I think in the last few weeks, they realized there was some polling came out that showed Trump competitive in New Hampshire, which surprised them. And they sent J.D. Vance up to do a rally, but they didn't really focus resources on New Hampshire, which, I'm not going to critique them. They obviously didn't need to. They won without New Hampshire. So,
yeah.
Their strategy worked. They didn't need New Hampshire. But if they had, I think it came close enough that if they had prioritized New Hampshire and invested resources there and treated it like a swing state, I think they would have probably won.
Yeah. But either way, Liberty Republicans are in a much better position in this session.
Yes. And now it looks very likely that some of the big changes that are going to happen this year, there's a very strong chance that New Hampshire becomes the first New England state with a right-to-work law, which would be huge. It's been something people have been fighting for, I don't know, half a century.
Yeah.
And there's never been able to kind of break the compulsory union lock on New England. So New Hampshire has the prospect of being the first. There is a strong push to expand education freedom accounts to a universal system. Right now, it's limited based on your family income as a percentage of the federal poverty level. Many of our Liberty legislators, including the Jason Osborne, who's the House Majority Leader, who came to New Hampshire as a participant in the Free State Project. He's been a real driving force for school choice, and so it looks very likely we might get to universal education freedom accounts there. And then Defend the Guard is a big push, of course. I imagine we're going to run into roadblocks with the governor if we get it that far, but I'm very confident for the very first time we'll be able to get a roll call vote in the Senate and put those politicians on record.
Let's remind people what that is, because it's sort of a complementary, I think, very innovative strategy that would work even better if you have a federal executive branch and a president that's not desperately wanting to start new wars.
And thankfully we have a Secretary of Defense who's publicly on the record of supporting Defend the Guard. And hopefully we have an incoming Director of National Intelligence. Maybe by the time this show airs, we'll know, Tulsi Gabbard, who at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum last time we spoke.
That's right, yeah.
She went on the record in support of Defend the Guard.
The first time I interviewed her was there.
Yeah.
My prediction, and I shouldn't do predictions because you end up looking stupid, but I think that she will win this fight and squeak through.
I think Susan Collins coming out and supporting her in the Intelligence Committee was a good sign.
Yes.
I don't know what's going on behind the scenes to make that happen, but I'm glad that it's happening. I will say I was very disappointed in Ron Wyden for all his talk of being an opponent of mass surveillance all these years, and he came up with some bullshit partisan excuse not to vote for Tulsi.
The Democrats are looking so hypocritical on Tulsi and RFK Jr. in particular, because I forget which senator it is, but one of the guys that's attacking RFK now was at his freaking wedding. So it's like, you guys are just hacks.
Yeah. I wonder what Bernie's going to do on Tulsi, because Tulsi, of course, resigned from the DNC in protest of how they were treating Bernie Sanders.
Right.
And then came out and endorsed him for president against Hillary Clinton. And I just, in my mind, if Bernie Sanders does not vote for Tulsi after all this, then he's become a total partisan hack and he has no honor.
I'm afraid that he's a puppet, and I'm afraid that they have him on a leash now. But that would be the ultimate betrayal if he abandons Tulsi after all she sacrificed for him.
Yeah.
But this is Washington, so
yeah,
strap in. That's what they do.
Yeah, you wonder what they got on him. But he's he's not. He's certainly. I've seen a lot of people on social media who've realized he's not the man they thought he was.
If you made it this far into the show, it means I must be doing something right. Kibbe on Liberty is just one of the amazing products we create at Free the People. We tell emotionally compelling stories and produce educational videos for the liberty curious. Our award-winning documentaries personalize all things liberty, independence, creativity, hard work, integrity, and perseverance. After the show, check out our work at freethepeople.org. And if you like what you see, donate to support what we do. That's freethepeople.org. Now back to the show. My theory, and this is a theory, I'll go full Joe Rogan and say I don't know anything, but my theory is that his wife's corrupt dealings with that university probably have something to do with the taming of Bernie Sanders. But we'll see. Maybe he comes out and does the right thing. I've said very many nice things about Bernie over the years because he's done some really interesting things on foreign policy. I used to agree with him quite a bit. Not anymore. Like he's lost his non-interventionist chops, and that again, like it feels like his masters have tamed him somehow.
Yeah.
But So Defend the Guard is again like it's almost our go bag if the chief executive has ambitions to start yet another war without Congress authorizing it, which is typical. I can't remember the last war they authorized.
Yeah, I think it was World War II.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're only counting actual declarations of war and not AUMFs.
Yeah. So, but there's been no wars since World War II, as I recall.
Yeah, it's been total peace and prosperity ever since.
Prosperity. And no nation building.
Yeah, not a single soldier has lost their life overseas in some boondoggle that they didn't even care to vote on. But you had asked me earlier to explain Defend the Guard, and say it is So the thing to understand for folks who are completely new to this is that the state National Guards have accounted for about 50% of troops on the ground in the wars in the Middle East of the last 20 years. The state National Guards answer to the states unless they are mobilized under constitutional purposes by the federal government. And the Constitution says there are only three purposes for which they can be mobilized for combat deployment, and that is to suppress insurrection, repel invasion, or enforce the laws of the Union. So I always go to Syria as the example. I think it's a clear-cut example, right? We've been over in Syria now for 11 years. Are we suppressing an insurrection? We fomented an insurrection. So that was the purpose. We were fomenting one. Are we repelling an invasion? We did the invasion. We weren't repelling it. We weren't invited there. Are we enforcing a law of the Union? There's no law of the Union you can point to, not even an AUMF. So they try to point to the 2001 AUMF after the 9/11 Twin Tower attacks, which was very broadly written in a very dangerous way. But even as broadly as that was written, like it was to retaliate against Al-Qaeda, and the mission in Syria involved giving weapons and aid and arms to Al-Qaeda. So it is like the height of cynicism to point to retaliation for the 9/11 Twin Tower attacks for why we need to give weapons to Al-Qaeda in Syria. So there's no authorization whatsoever, and yet our troops are over there. But because it doesn't meet a constitutional purpose, that means the states have every constitutional authority to say we withdraw our consent for our soldiers to be sent over there, bring them home. And this has really rattled a lot of chains in the Pentagon. They mobilize some 4-star generals to go out and lobby in the states about why this is such a bad idea. But it's been growing in momentum. New Hampshire was the first state to pass it through a lower chamber. In the last legislative session, it also passed the Arizona Senate and the Idaho Senate. Now this year, it's really gaining some steam. I just saw that thanks to our mutual friend Nick Freitas in Virginia, who led the charge there. I read this. It's so kind of hard to believe. I wonder what the context is, but they say it passed 99-0 in the in the Virginia House of Delegates.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
Nick's a pretty big guy. He was probably just intimidating them by standing there.
Maybe that's it. Yeah, maybe I'd love to hear directly from the horse's mouth, kind of what happened there. That's pretty impressive. And I'm hearing a lot of other states where you're starting to see this pass through legislative chambers. So we haven't yet had it pass through both chambers in any single state.
Yeah.
That'll be key. But I think that once a single state passes it, the dam is going to break, because the big thing is, and the big argument against it is that states are afraid to go it alone. They're afraid of being retaliated against. The federal government controls so much through the mechanism of they steal our money and they ransom it back to us with strings attached. Mm-hmm. And so the argument against Defend the Guard is always, what if the federal government cuts our funding? And I think that's a terrible argument when we're talking about like sending our sons and daughters off to fight and die in wars that have no clear mission and Congress doesn't care enough to declare. But that's what they always fall back on, is what about the money?
Yeah. When did Pete Hegseth endorse Defend the Guard?
When it passed the New Hampshire House of Representatives. He was on Fox and Friends and was asked about it, and he said it seemed like a great idea to him as someone who had served in the National Guard and had experienced these missionless deployments.
Yeah, and the same thing happened with Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah.
At the New Hampshire Freedom Forum, and this is one thing that the Defend the Guard guys are pretty good at is just asking the question, because sometimes I suspect there's plenty of other legislators that, should they be asked publicly, might be forced to admit that it's a very good idea.
Yeah.
But it's more convenient not to talk about it.
You piss off a lot less people that way if you can just say nothing.
Yeah. Well, that's very exciting. By the way, Nick, I think he's still in session right now, because he's going to come on and talk about Defend the Guard. Great. And he can give us he can explain what he did. Yeah. I think he just stared at them.
Well, when I see 99-0, I wonder if they got an actual roll call vote, or if it just went under the hammer. Yeah. And they're like anticipating, the Senate's going to kill this thing. We don't need to go on record. But at least I know that's the kind of stuff I saw all the time in Maine. Yeah. So we'll see what happens there. But it was a great news all the same. Yeah. See it pass another chamber.
So one of my favorite events of the year is happening again this year, Pork Fest in northern New Hampshire. And do you happen to remember the dates? I don't remember the dates off the top of my head.
Yeah, I want to say June 16th to the 22nd. Plus or minus a few days. Everyone can check that out for themselves at porkfest.com. Yeah. But
somebody look up Porkfest so we get the dates right. And Free the People will be back there again. And I know over the years, I don't remember the first time that I went to Porkfest, but it was probably something like 15 years ago. Yeah. And I've been fairly regular. I love that place. It reminds me of the Grateful Dead parking lot, except for all of the tie-dyes, there's also some pretty well-strapped individuals. And safest place on the planet.
Yeah, it is a totally unique event in the Liberty Movement. And I mean, it's been, I've been going off and on since 2012. I never imagined I was going to be running the thing. Certainly not when I remember in 2021 when I was working at Young Americans for Liberty, and last minute I decided to go, and I didn't have a camping spot, and I asked the universe for help, and Matt Kibbe reached out. And
Yeah.
I still appreciate that. You letting me stay at your campsite there. And
It was a gathering of vagabonds. Yeah.
yeah, that was a good year. We were all kind of. It was we were still in the throes of all the COVID craziness. And
Was that the year that's the year was sold out and insanely popular because
Yes.
it was literally the only gathering, not just Liberty Gathering, but maybe one of the few gatherings, because we were still canceling concerts. And was it 2021 that Freedom Fest got screwed over by their conference hotel in Las Vegas? I think it was 21.
Yeah, and Young Americans for Liberty got. I think actually it was the year before. Yeah, got
Maybe it was
screwed over
2020,
in Texas too. It was hard to do big conferences during those years. But in New Hampshire, the Free State movement pressed on. Even in 2020, 2020 was a little less organized and it was smaller, but there was a decision made. We are moving forward. We are doing this, and we haven't missed a year in 22 years.
And they were right, and almost everybody else was wrong about gatherings. But 2021 was just cool because it felt cathartic there, and it also felt like there was a real sense of community there. The sense of community there is always quite strong, but I think since 2021 it's been more diverse and more strong as a community, and I couldn't recommend for people, particularly if you like to camp, but you don't have to camp.
Yeah.
But there's nothing else like it.
Yeah.
If only we could get the surviving members of the Grateful Dead to play there, that would be my ultimate dream come true.
Yeah, and we're in the process right now of booking speakers and getting things organized. This year the theme is Taste the Revolution, and we are putting a special emphasis on food freedom. And we are really glad we just came to an agreement with Joel Salatin, who's going to be coming and joining us to kick off the week. I know you know Joel Salatin, but amazing figure in the food freedom movement. I remember seeing him years back at Freedom Fest debating John Mackey about whether vegetarianism or not vegetarianism. He's a big advocate for eating meat, just doing it ethically and avoiding the factory farm system. And he's really built an amazing model to be able to do that. So we're looking forward to having Joel Salatin there. Connor Boyack is coming to Pork Fest. He's the author of the Tuttle Twins series, and also he's very involved in his policy work with the Libertas Institute in Utah. So he's going to be coming. He's going to be giving a main stage talk, but he's also going to be doing a reading of one of the Tuttle Twins books for our Porcupines program. We've been doing a lot in recent years to build up programs for families. Mm-hmm. And this is, one of the things that's really kind of evolved over the decades of Pork Fest is as a lot of the original Pork Fest goers got older and had kids, and now they bring their kids, and so we still have a lot of the traditional Pork Fest content, but we've been developing a lot more for kids of all ages, both the younger kids with, readings of children's books and
it's an extremely family-friendly event.
Yeah. My favorite was we did a mock legislature last year with the 10 to 17 crowd, and had them. They formed political parties. They submitted a legislation, and they went through the whole process on taking a bill through the whole process to becoming law. I won't say what bill they put forward, but I was impressed. They are very decidedly not fans of Washington, D.C.
At Kibbe on Liberty, freedom is a lifestyle 24/7, something you live and breathe and wear every day. If that describes you, you need the very best Liberty swag in the market today, just like this shirt I happen to be wearing. Go to freethepeople.org/KOL and check out our exciting merch. You too can love Liberty and look cool. So I was just hanging out with Joel Salatin fairly recently at something called the Liberty Film Festival in southern Vermont. I'm going to screw up the town, beautiful town, and it's the intersection of Maha and natural foods and Stewardship of the Earth crowd, beautiful community, and also the Libertarian community, which has some pretty potent critiques of, starting with any number of pieces of legislation that Thomas Massey has introduced to stop the government from hurting small local family farmers, beef producers, raw milk. I mean, he's got a litany of legislation that tells a very libertarian story about how it is that the government, in collusion with these mega corporate farmers, just screws the little guy and undermines our food in the process. And I think New Hampshire is ripe for that version of the libertarian revolution as well.
Yeah, it's there's a very strong and robust. I mean, there's strong and robust communities around so many liberty issues in New Hampshire, but there's a really great food sovereignty movement there as well. And looking forward to getting them involved and one thing fun we're doing this year is we're bringing back an old Pork Fest tradition. We're doing the one pot cook-off, which is basically people can participate by making food dishes to share from their campsite, and it's a great kind of incentive for people to kind of go around, taste different things that people have prepared, get to know their neighbors in this libertarian pop-up village, and vote on what was the best dish. So that's going to be a fun, engaging way to get people involved.
I'm reminding myself on camera that I am supposed to connect you with the food sovereignty guys that were there in Vermont, and also the organizer of the film festival, because I think you guys should be collaborating. And this, I wish I could remember the name of the time, but just look it up, Liberty Film Festival, and it's right on the New Hampshire border, and you guys should be working together.
Awesome. I'd love to connect.
All right. So food freedom. And by the way, Connor Boyack, I hope he does his real world conspiracies, Tuttle Twins, my favorite in the series, and it'll red pill the hell out of you, because you're going to discover it talks about things like Operation Mockingbird, where the CIA was buying Hollywood stars. Tell me if this sounds familiar. The CIA, or maybe the USAID, was buying news outlets and reporters and Hollywood stars to dictate and amplify their preferred message about what Americans should be allowed to hear. Does that sound familiar? Or is it just a wild conspiracy? Well, what's funny about it and in this book is that, well, thanks to the church committee and documents that were uncovered, we now know that that's precisely what they were doing. And they supposedly stopped. So I wonder what that program's called now. I don't know.
I'm sure they're not doing anything improper or wrong.
They said they wouldn't.
Yeah. They seem like good people, trustworthy people.
Yeah. Transparent.
All of these agencies.
You should ask your senator, Angus King, your former senator.
Yeah, he's not my senator anymore. Now I've got 2 new U.S. senators to complain about.
Everybody does.
Yeah. Well, not everybody.
Except maybe Kentucky.
Yeah, Kentucky's got 1 U.S. senator to complain about.
Yeah. So anything else about PorkFest?
Just that people should get their tickets at porkfest.com. It's going to be a great year. We are still booking speakers, and there'll be more announcements to come. I would also like to plug the New Hampshire Liberty Forum coming up in late April. We just announced that one of our keynote speakers for our Saturday evening VIP dinner is going to be Jeff Deist, former president of the Mises Institute and former chief of staff for Congressman Ron Paul.
That name keeps popping up.
Yeah, it's like he planted a lot of seeds that keep growing into great liberty trees all around the country and the world. But most concentrated in New Hampshire, of course.
Yeah.
We're actually doing something really something new that we're adding to Liberty Forum this year, which is we've asked people out in the liberty world to identify challenges that we face on the road to emerging free societies and to propose potential solutions to those challenges. And they're writing a paper, and they're going to come present it, and there's going to be a following brainstorming session with participants to kind of, how do we improve this solution? Is this a viable solution? What more could we do here? And so we've got a real range of interesting presentations that are going to happen, ranging from the head of the Greater Idaho movement, is going to be coming to join us. This is a movement of folks in eastern Oregon who are trying to break away and join Idaho as a way to get away from the progressive government that doesn't represent them. And so that's intriguing, especially as I think about how the 2nd District of Maine should break away and join New Hampshire. Two, we have someone who submitted a paper on how do you overcome challenges with dating in a libertarian society and trying to build, good, strong families to a whole host of things that we're going to be looking forward to, kind of this new series of events.
Libertarian dating advice.
Yeah, and this one is being led by a woman, so it's not a libertarian male autist.
So all of our awkward men should definitely go to that.
They could learn a few things.
A few things. That'll be helpful.
Yeah.
I'll try to get that on my schedule. I had to see because I went last year and it was a fantastic event, and in that particular thing, like policy proposals that become workshops where you tap into the distributed skills of the crowd, it reminds me of other things I've done like that. It's a very productive process. Yeah,
that's an experiment for us. I'm very excited, and there's a lot of excitement around it, and we've got a lot of great proposals that came in. So we're looking forward to that, and we are going to, for those who've been to Liberty Forum in the past, we are still doing our kind of traditional main stage Liberty Forum, content. You'll see the speeches and panels that you may have seen in the past, but we are focusing on areas of kind of where we've seen advancements around, liberty for real advancements in recent years. So I'm sure we're going to have a great conversation on cryptocurrencies and defend the guard and a lot of topics we're putting together as we speak.
The crypto conversation will finally answer the question is, do libertarians just argue or do sometimes they cooperate too?
Well, we argue a lot, but at the same time, I don't know. For all the arguing that's going on, people really have built some very impressive parallel infrastructure to challenge the Federal Reserve. Yep. And so much of it was, early adopters in New Hampshire.
Yeah, I joke because the Free State Project sort of stands out as proof that free people can in fact cooperate and not just argue about the best shitcoin to buy.
It's easy to argue when all you have is digital communication with people, right? If all you are is on Twitter, right? It's easy to just argue. It's a medium for arguing, but the value of the Free State Project is getting all these people in the same physical space, and I think that's where the best collaborations emerge.
Cool. So shameless promotion. Tell us where we find you, Free State, any of these things that you've talked about. Just remind people.
Yeah, so you can follow me and the Free State Project on X. That's where I think we're most prolific. So that is, for me, it's at Senator Brakey. For the Free State Project, it's at Free State NH. And go to the Free State Project website, fsp.org. There you can sign up for our newsletter. We have a great newsletter. If you're not getting it, you're missing out. And you can also learn about our events, both the Porcupine Freedom Festival, the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, and in reality, there are liberty events taking place almost every single day in New Hampshire, from cryptocurrency meetups to rucking groups to knit and bitch sessions to whatever your interest is. There's a liberty group for that, and you can see that on our liberty calendar, and you could come and plan your own customized porcupine vacation. Come to New Hampshire for a week and experience what it's really like living in the Free State.
Cool. Free the People will be at PorcFest this year. We don't know what it is yet, but we're going to organize a number of happy hours and community events at our space. Terry and I are going to be talking about something on the main stage. She's probably going to be girl-splaining to me how the world really works, and people should definitely see that. So we'll be there.
Glad to have you back.
Thanks, Eric. This is cool. Thanks for watching. If you liked the conversation, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and also ring the bell for notifications. And if you want to know more about Free the People, go to freethepeople.org.